I'm Patty, I'm an addict. It's wonderful out here. And it's been an honor to really be here at this convention, but especially to be in the presence of Jimmy and Kim at their home the other night, and just brought tears to my eyes to just be here with you guys. And Jimmy had turned to me, we were eating dinner, and he says, I have a favor to ask you. And I said, what's that? And he says, could you please introduce me? You know me better than anyone else when I got here. And you know, that was awesome, because it makes me feel old though, because he was 19 and a half when he came to the program, and he came in the program, I think that's right, isn't it? Oh, you're 20? Well, excuse me. Okay, he's 20. And he came to an outpatient program that I worked in and was a director of at Peachford, Charter Peachford Outpatient. And he came in with his parents. And he was a skinny little fella. And the thing about Jimmy, though, he was willing. You were very willing to do what you had to do. And he came to every group. He didn't miss any. He actually followed instructions, and that was very rare back then, you know, to follow those instructions. And I've watched you grow. No, I haven't been here all the time, but Facebook has been awesome to see you and Kim with your children and be so successful in life. And, you know, you're a real inspiration for those that you sponsor and for those that are around you. And I love you very much. So welcome, Jimmy.
My name's Jimmy, I'm an addict. Before we get started, I need y'all to indulge me for just a second. My son is 24 years old today. So on the count of 3, I just want you to say happy birthday, Jacob, so he can have 100 people or so wish him happy birthday. So you ready? I don't want loud and proud. Let's raise the roof for just a second. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday, Jacob! Thank you. So, you can't not get up here and not be nervous. I'd be lying to you. So, you know, when I first walked into the room yesterday and saw the chairs in here, you couldn't pull the pin out of my butt with a tow truck. So I enlisted a little bit of help, and I'll tell you where it's coming from. First was asking Pat to introduce me. The second is this shirt here is Bill Walker and I used to go to Panama City and showed up with the same shirt. And unlike women, because apparently with women you can't ever speak to each other again if y'all wear the same dress, but for men we become best friends forever. So I'd show up and he'd go, did you bring the shirt? Every Panama City. So I got Bill Walker with me.
All right.
This is hard. So this bottle. Jason Young gave me this on my 50th birthday, and he passed away a year ago. He was killed in an accident. And when I ride my bike, I take this water bottle with me every day. So I got Jason with me as well. And I wanted to say to Pat, you know, another reason I asked Pat to do this is, you know, everybody should know this. First of all, this woman is responsible for starting the first Narcotics Anonymous in the state of Georgia in 1974. The second thing is I wanted to tell you personally, God and everyone in this room, that I'm now 52 years old. I've been married for 25 years. I have 2 beautiful children. And I have been clean since the day I walked into her treatment center that she created 31 years ago. So thank you. And so let's get down to it. So one other thing I wanted to do, I was a little concerned about. I used to be in the training business. I know what it's like to eat lunch and then sit down in a chair after lunch. So in order to avoid any type of snoring later on, it might disturb anyone, I had a little thing here. This is my top 10 slogans of NA that I came up with. Actually, I didn't come up with it. My sponsor and his sponsor did it. So this is my entertainment section of it. So you may have heard some of these. Some of you probably haven't, and I think they made up a couple of them. And my sponsor's Mike R, by the way, and his sponsor is Kenny G. 10 is, it's what you learn after you think you know it all that's really important. 9, if nobody had told you they love you today, get with your sponsor and try to find out why. Expectations are just premeditated resentments. I like that one. If you turn it over and don't let go, you will be upside down. And I have personal experience with that one. 3 ways to get the word out. Some of you know this one: telephone, television, tell an addict. 5, plan your plans, just don't plan your results. That's Billy B. We'll put that one in there. Man, I love very much. Number 4, your actions speak so loud I can't hear a word you're saying. Number 3, there are a lot of yets out there for me. I'm also pretty concerned about the agains. Number 2, be nice to a newcomer. One of them may be your sponsor one day. I know that hit home for a few of you. So. And number 1, from Kenny G in Lewisburg, Tennessee, my favorite saying of all, he says, the program works if you work it. It even works if you don't work it, just not for you. So all I have to give you is my own experience. I'm not a big preacher. I don't like telling people what to do. I really don't. I mean, I'm still the kind of person when the Mexican food is delivered and they say it's a hot plate, I got to touch the plate. So I could share what I've done, what I've been through. I'm going to go through kind of where I came from. I thought identification was really important to me. I got clean very young, so I understand what that's like. I'm not young anymore. I know what it's like to have people say, I spilled more dope than you used. And I'd say, well, if you hadn't spilled so much, maybe you got here sooner. I know when you're in a meeting and people go, you should be so blessed to be young this early, how irritating that is to somebody that's really young. And I'm kind of serious about that because we need to treat them all the same. I was grateful that people that were 30, 40 years older than me did not treat me like a little kid, right? I was another addict in a meeting and I was treated that way. And I'm very, very grateful for that, right? And it helped me stay clean. And so let's start a little bit about, kind of where I came from. And it's a little bit different story than some. I didn't really come from the streets. I came from an upper middle class home. My parents were never divorced. I was never abused. I went to a private high school about 1 mile from here, by the way. I was born 5 minutes from here, right behind the airport. No abuse in my family. Had a car when I was 16, money. I had absolutely no excuse whatsoever to be a drug addict. My parents provided me everything. And but when drugs hit my system, that the hardest part for me growing up was I was taught right from wrong. My parents are really good people. They had integrity. They're honest. They're hardworking. I knew right from wrong, but I was a liar, a cheat, and a thief. What's nice today is people, showed up and said, I came to hear you speak. I want to come support you in that. Before I got clean, when they heard my name, it was hide the wallet and lock up the liquor cabinet. That's what I heard when I was a little kid, even. So, I was introduced to drugs early. My parents drank and that kind of stuff, and I can't. My memory is horrible. I mean, they told me in treatment that your short-term memory will come back after a while, and it's been 31 years. I'm kind of losing hope. So I may jump around a bit. I cover a couple of bullet points I want to make sure I cover, and identification is one of them. But, so it doesn't matter where you come from. The addiction will take you to the same place. And, in my case, I'm the youngest of 4. So my brothers and sisters, 11, 13, 11, 13, 16 years older than me. So I was the baby, or really the accident of the family. And that's a story in itself, but I'll get to that later. Like I said, I had everything. But I grew up as a kind of a normal kid. I mean, we dammed up creeks, we built forts, we went hunting, we played basketball, football, baseball, loved sports. Anything that I could do like that, I would do. So I was kind of the all-American kid. And the way addiction kind of worked for me is I would tell people I drink, everybody drank, my parents drink, drinking's okay, stealing liquor. The only thing my father ever said is, don't water down the booze. You just ruined the whole bottle of booze. So if I stole some, I'd just leave it out. Really the first time I remember getting high was, my father was a pilot for Eastern Airlines. And so we traveled quite a bit when I was a kid. I think I was about 10 years old, and we went to Germany. And went out to eat one night, and he said, well, there's no drinking age here, you can have a beer. So they were like these giant thing of, Stein thing they brought. I couldn't even lift it. I was 80 pounds soaking wet. And I drank about half of it, and I was plastered. And to this day, I can still remember the whole evening. Like walking back, I can remember the color of the drapes, the sheets, and everything else. I mean, it made a big impact on me. I was just carefree. Shame and guilt and concern was not there. It was just, I was kind of loose in the world. And rooms spinning around, all those things I remember, and it stuck with me. I mean, I probably couldn't find my car keys right now, but I can recall that day, very clearly. The same thing, first time I used other drugs. I can remember when that first thing happened. I remember everything about it. The one thing about growing up is the little kid in the family. My sister was funny. This is my brother Jack, my brother Johnny, my little brother Jimmy. So I was a little kid, and I was kind of like an only child in a certain way because my brothers and sisters were kind of out of the house by the time I came of any kind of age. And it's kind of like having 3 extra sets of parents. So I always wanted to be at the big table, right? With Thanksgiving and Christmas, I was always in the card table out in the garage or front yard somewhere. And I had visions of one of them dying off just so I could sit at the big table for Thanksgiving 1 year. That's all I wanted. Then they had nieces and nephews, and that complicated the thing, even more. The way that drugs really progressed with me was I had all these things. I had sports, I had music, I played the trumpet in high school band, and those were the things I had. And it's tough, getting clean when you're young because one of the things is we didn't lose, wives and jobs and cars and stuff. And I was really 21 when I came in. It was hard, sometimes hard to identify, but what I lost was everything that I had, right? And I have to put it into perspective. If a baby's got a bottle and a blanket and you take those away, they cry because that's the only thing they have is the blanket and the bottle. That's all they got. And that's kind of how it was for me. So drugs began to replace things that got taken away from me in one way, shape, or form. So I love sports. I was kind of an athlete, and God played a terrible trick on me. I just quit growing. Now, I started on every team I played on up until 12 years old, basketball, football, baseball. But when I got to about 14, I hadn't grown at all. I was the smallest person in my class, period, by far. I was like Nicholas on 8 is Enough. And it was humiliating to not even make a team, right? And so since I didn't make it, I just quit. Didn't play sports anymore. So I started using a little bit more, put those drugs in. And't always progress. Well, I'm not going to smoke pot, never be a pothead. I'd start smoking pot. Not going to take any pills or anything like that. I'd start taking pills, a couple months later. And I had a reservation that I always held on to, and that was, well, you can't really be a drug addict unless you use needles, right? And I don't believe that today at all, but in my mind I did. But eventually I started using needles. And that's important because I had violated my own respect. I said I wouldn't do it, but I did it anyway. If the wallet was laying there, I would take money out of it. If I could steal gas from the gas station or cigarettes, I would do it. I would not tell you honestly what I had for breakfast in the morning, because the best way to be a good liar is to believe your lies. And I believed them all, but I had to protect myself. So the next thing, I played music in high school, and I sort of did a lot of that. And it was a big deal. I actually played tap for a guy's funeral on Virginia Avenue one time. I used to get paid to play at churches and stuff. I was pretty good at it. Possibly had a career, at least go to college. But when I went to college, I gave up music. Didn't even take the trumpet with me. What did I replace it with? More drugs, right? And also in high school, I had I had a healthy sex life up until about the 12th grade, and in the 12th grade, I finally found somebody to share it with. And that's kind of important because I had my first real relationship, in high school. I was the captain of the band. She was a majorette, and I very, very much cared about this person. That's the first time I'd opened my heart to somebody, and call them all the time, think about them all the time. I'd really not experienced that before. And in that relationship, she put up with me for a couple of years after our first year of college, and finally kicked me to the curb. I was lying, staying out, and all this kind of stuff, and she got sick of it. And that was a big loss for me, and it was kind of the final thing. I'd lost the music, I'd lost sports, I'd lost the relationship. And I dove into a bottle of Crown Royal that day and a bong, and I never came out for about 3.5 years. And, I would use, from the time I woke up to the time that I went to sleep. I said I smoked 2 packs of cigarettes, and that's all I could do because I was smoking so many other things. I didn't have time to smoke any more cigarettes. A few things that happened, just some devastation pieces to it. I got locked up. My mother tried everything. I don't know if anybody else experienced this. They didn't know what to do with me. Drugs was not part of my parents or my brothers and sisters' lives, but she would cut out all the articles on marijuana and stuff and lay it in my room or in my bathroom and stuff. She didn't know what else to do, so I have all those somewhere. I don't know if I read of them. Your testicles going to shrink up and all that stuff. And they took me to a psychologist. I got arrested for possession, had to go through basically what would be drug court now. They called it pretrial intervention back in the day. And I had a few car wrecks. My friend Dan over there sitting in the front row, he and I went to high school and used together and got clean together. I'll mention him later. But I had 3 wrecks in 5 days. Now, to my defense, Dan was driving in one of them, so I was only driving in 2 of them. And so I totaled 2 cars in less than 24 hours. So totaled the first one coming home one night. I think Dan was with me and ended up walking home. And my dad said, well, I got this, it was nice, XR7, Cougar XR7 white, oh God, this is a cool car. It was red interior, and I'm going to take this back to college. I had it for 3 hours. And a friend of ours named Mike and I were riding, and we were getting high on our way to whatever, and went around this curve a little too fast, off in the ditch, flipped this car end over end, landed upside down, and our friend Mike I pulled him out of the car, and he was cut from here to here, blood spewing out of his head. And the other thing that saved his life is I managed to wreck about a quarter mile from a fire station. I mean, you could literally see it from where we wrecked. And so you got my friend there on the other side in the ambulance, and his pillow is solid red, and the ladies go, "You got to go, we got to get him quick." His face was white, lips were gray. They were popping him in the face to try to keep him awake. And they got to the hospital, and the police show up and give me all the tickets. But the worst part was he was right next to me in a room. And when you have a head injury, they don't want to do much to you to see if there's damage. So they were pulling the glass out and shaving his head, and I could hear him screaming right next to me. And that was the worst part. My hands were shaking. I almost killed one of my best friends. And a normal person might look at that and think that I need to change my lifestyle. And you know what I did. I went home and I got high. Right? And a big part of my using, and I'm going to get into the spiritual principles and things about that have helped me out a lot, is just absolute eating up with guilt and shame and fear. Those were my worst aspects. And to the point I would tell you that I was a very angry person. People would say I never smiled. And doing step work taught me that I was not really anger. Anger was my response mechanism to cover up fear, guilt, and shame. That's how I functioned. And so trying to fix anger wasn't fixing the problem, right? Has anyone ever told you don't have to be angry? I don't know if has that ever helped you? It hasn't helped me one time. It just makes me more angry. So steps really helped me with all that. So went on to college. Using just got far worse. Selling drugs. I was the worst drug dealer ever. Y'all know the story, right? Look, I'm going to spend this money. We're going to buy 12 pounds of pot. We're going to make all this money, and then we'll have free drugs and money. And what I end up with, no drugs and no money. Every frickin' time. Every frickin' time. I used to call myself a freelance pharmacist. That was my real major at college. So, college just got worse. I'll just give you kind of towards the end of it. And y'all know what it's like. You end up isolating people. And there's only a certain type of people that wants to spend time with you and that you want to spend time with. You don't want to spend time with healthy people because you feel guilty as hell about the crap you're doing, right? So you get more and more seedy individuals that I spent time with. And I came to a new definition of loneliness, right? One guy lived down the street from me. It was so bad. He sold a little coke, but he was anemic and couldn't handle the needles, and he would call me over to help him with the needle because he couldn't do it by himself. And I would go over there to stick a needle in this guy's arm just to get free drugs. How sick is that? But I would do it in a heartbeat. Every time he called, I would run down there. And and one of the worst parts is suicide started coming to me because I started to recognize at some point that I am a defective human being. There's something wrong with me. I mean, I would try to quit for a day or two and not really being able to do that. And I was the guy. I mean, I ended up in the apartment looking out the window, paranoid about somebody out to get me. I mean, there were a few people out to get me, but it wasn't completely justified. And probably the worst of it was a friend of mine got busted one time, and his girlfriend lived at the house. She asked me to come help clean up the place. They tore everything up. And she had this bag full of paraphernalia and said, "Go get rid of this in case they come back." And one of the things that was in there was a little .38 handgun. And I took that gun back to the apartment I lived in, and my roommate had moved out, and I'm just surviving. I mean, I'm at the point to where my family and friends, they loved me in that lot, right? But I was so painful for them to look at that they could not be around me, right? The loneliness to where the ones you love say, "Look, you're on your own," right? None of my friends, the people I hung out with, I didn't really like, but they had things I needed. Certain drugs. One guy was a bartender. Those were my last two friends. And I used to sit at night, and I was starting to feel like my dad now. Back before cable TV, the stations went off the air at night, right? And I had this gun, and I would play Russian roulette with this gun at night and hold it up to my head. And I'm just shy of 21 years old, and I can't think of a reason to live. Right? And I would watch this little symbol would come up, and they would play the Star Spangled Banner, and then it'd go. And I watched that every night with that frickin' gun in my head the last couple of weeks. And the best definition of a bottom I've ever heard is when the future looks worse than the past. Right? And that's exactly where I was. I didn't see it getting any better. About that time, I knew I was getting kicked out of college. A whopping 1.4 grade point average after 3 years down at Georgia Southern. They asked me to leave. My presence was no longer needed. So I went back home, packed up, and my parents kind of read me the riot act. And okay, you will be home every night by 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and a curfew. And here's going to be the rules. You're going to get a job. All the stuff that happens. And I must have misunderstood because I came home at 10 o'clock the next morning. And my dad went out and grabbed stuff out of the car, and it's kind of unusual. My mother was a disciplinarian. My dad did the beating. My mom did the talking, generally speaking. But my father sat down, and he got me in the couch, and he said, "This has gone on long enough." He said, "You got two choices. I got a appointment with you at Peachford Hospital, where I want you to sign this paper and sign away your family rights, and I want you to leave this place, and I don't ever want to see you again. That's your choices." And that's where I got to just shy of my 21st birthday. And 6 months earlier, I would have walked out the door with pride in my hand. I don't know, I probably got in the driveway, but I would have left. But I was ready. They caught me at the right time, right? Because I didn't see that tomorrow was going to be any better than yesterday. Next week wasn't going to be any better. I was just a bad human being, right, that was defective in some way that wasn't gonna get any better. And I knew people that went to Peachford Hospital. All I knew is I never saw them again. So I'd also seen the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And that's where I thought I was going, I kid you not. Road playing ping pong on Thorazine all day, I'm okay with that. Me and the world had fought, I had lost, I do not want to play anymore. That's where I was. That's absolutely where I was. But this is where the miracle of kind of recovery happened. The first day I walked into that treatment center. There's one of the ladies there is named Virginia, and she did it's like the nurse and all, and she did the evaluation of how bad my cholesterol stuff was and all this. And I was waiting for the lecture. We sat down to talk about stuff, and you go to probation. It's the list of rules, sign at the bottom. Psychologist, you need to be doing this, this, and this. You go to probation, they give you a list of rules, and I'm waiting for the list of rules and sign at the bottom. But she did something different. She said, "My name's Virginia, I'm an alcoholic. Let me tell you a little bit about me." And she went and talked for about 15 or 20 minutes and basically told me part of her story. Now, I'm 21 years old, weighed 125 pounds, soaking wet. Most of it hair. This woman was 20, 30 years older than me. And she got through talking, and I can't tell you what she said, But I can tell you that for the first time in my entire life, I was sitting in front of a human being who I thought understood how I feel, right? I got a little bit of hope in my life. That candle been blown out. This woman understands. She was talking stuff like I felt, putting it into words that I could not do. And that is the beauty of one addict sharing with another is without parallel, right? And that was the first angel I met was sitting in front of that person. And then she went on to say, well, you got to go to these meetings. We got to go to AA and NA meetings. And when you get a year, they have a cake and birthday. And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. I believe the program said 28 days. Because I had not been to NA meetings. Dan had been to some AA meetings, and I knew Dan's problem was alcohol before this. And when we went out with Dan, we made sure that Dan didn't drink. Now, we smoked pot with him, gave him Quaaludes, but we made sure he didn't drink. I mean, checking his glass at night and everything else. I mean, that's all that I knew about recovery. And it's still amazing of the lack of knowledge that there is. And I was in a meeting in Chattanooga at the treatment center place one night, and a lady, it was like in her 60s, it's still there, that we still got work to do. She's probably 68, and she said, I'm an alcoholic, and I've been using marijuana for 40 years, and it finally led to a relapse. It's kind of funny, but the misinformation that is still out there in the world is still there. We've still got work to do, and there's a lot of stuff that PR and H&I do great things about that. So getting back into treatment and met some good people there. I mean, it was kind of interesting. I had like a superior court judge, people that own businesses, then me and a couple of street people. I mean, we had an eclectic group that was in my group. Quite a few of them still clean today. And I remember the first problem I had outside of I'm happy, I've got a little hope in my life, I've met some recovering addicts, I think this thing is kind of working. And then they showed us the steps one day, and I started reading in my first stumbling block. Step 2. They started mentioning God and higher power, and I'm like, okay, this is not going to work. Okay, I got some problems with this. And what I'm about to tell you a story is for those of you, and I have a lot of people that grew up in church and that go back to church and have very strong spiritual programs, and that's part of their program. I'm not one of those people, but I'm telling you that is not a requirement, okay? But I struggle with separating spirituality, which I didn't even know what the hell that meant to begin with, from religion. I grew up going to a Methodist church. I hung out partying with the Methodist preacher's daughter and son, the Baptist preacher's daughter and son. I knew what they were doing every night, which was the same thing I was doing, but yet talking about all the people that weren't there on Sunday morning. and I used to sell drugs in college to a Catholic priest. Right? I mean, dudes are like a lot of drugs, not a little drugs. And so I had all this conflict about that, and I don't know if I didn't believe in God or I felt so unworthy of God, a higher power, that if I walked in and I would burst into flames if I walked into a church, because I felt so bad about myself. And so this is for you people, and I'm not knocking religion at all. I don't mean it that way. I'm just trying to separate that you can have a higher power and a spiritual program without necessarily having to do it there, okay? And that's what I have done. I had to do. And I really struggle with that. I mean, I had all these questions in my mind, and I didn't understand what spirituality was, and people would try to explain it to me, and I was more confused when they got through talking than, because nobody could articulate it. I'm a very practical person, and I needed a practical answer. And I tried on your higher power like a coat, and it just didn't fit. And I would try years on, and it just didn't fit. I didn't think I was ever going to find something that would work for me. And I asked, can I skip these when I was in treatment? I'll do the rest of them. I can't do these. I mean, I just can't. And they told me, you got to do this. Okay. The only rule is you can use anything that's not you. But there'll be a time in your recovery to where you will be somewhere and you can't get on the phone, you can't get in front of another human being, and the only thing that will keep you from using is a higher power. And she was absolutely right about that. And I'll give you my example. So 17 years later, I'm 17 years clean. My job, I got to go to Sydney, Australia to work for the 2000 Olympics. I was there for 3.5 weeks. And they had rented houses for us. And a good friend of mine I work with was there. He's kind of a partier, but he knows my story. And the agreement was nothing would be in the house, right? And tell you, Australians like to party. Let me just tell you that. So we were in this house, and one day I was out, and we had different shifts, and I came home a little early. I was in a good mood. I'd been at a topless beach all day, so I was in an exceptionally good mood. Beautiful country, nice people. And I walked in a little early, and my buddy was over there rolling up one of my favorite things in the world. And I stopped and I stared at it, and this thought hit me. You're 17,000 miles from home. Nobody would ever know. You couldn't get further from home unless you had a spaceship. But I had some recovery and I'd done some footwork, and literally within 2 minutes there was a knock at the door for this person picking me up to go to a meeting because I had made a phone call earlier, you know. And that's what God is. God isn't doing stuff for me. God is helping me do stuff. We're a partnership. We're a team, right? Right? You understand? So my first higher power, after thinking about the times I drove a car, and I would be sitting in a chair and thinking, okay, if I can just get to the car, I can get home. Crawl, fall over stuff, whatever, I can get. And I would drive like that every day. I mean, I went to 5 funerals of people that died in car wrecks before I graduated high school, right? And I would throw up and not even bother to, you know, stop the car, just lean out the window, you know, try to keep the quarter panel lined up with some sort of line. And I've wrecked every car my father ever owned and walked away with nothing but a few scratches on my head. There's got to be something looking out for me. Right? But what really turned me around with this concept is forget religion for a minute. Just find something outside of yourself that is powerful. And after about 3 months, they were forcing me to do step work, and I was in an aftercare group and write down, and I started thinking about, dang, I got 3 months clean. What happened? Well, I'm sick as I used to be. I really hadn't done anything except show up at these meetings. And somehow when I show up to these meetings, I do not use. So my NA group was my first higher power, because you guys were a power greater than me. Because if I didn't go there, I wouldn't stay clean. And I moved away out of South Atlanta. I grew up in Fairburn, really, and moved to the north side of town and lived with my sister just to get away, because it was everywhere for me, everywhere. And so that was my first higher power. Today, the way I look at God is God helps me make decisions, right? I have a choice every day. I can go to the dope house, right? I can go to an NA meeting, right? So what people ask, what is God's will? Well, God's will is what I need to do, not what I want to do, right? So when I have a really good day is when what I want to do is what I need to do. That's when I'm starting to feel spiritual. Spirituality to me is, my favorite definition is the definition of integrity in the second tradition. It says that integrity is the consistent application of spiritual principles, even when there's reason not to. Right? Even when I want to slap my 14-year-old son. I don't do it. I think about it, but I don't do it. Another story coming up in a few minutes. So, you know, the last time I did the 11th step, I had kind of an epiphany a couple of years ago, and it was the most impactful step for me in that, because I used to have this thing, right, pray in the morning, pray at night, right, and then I'd wreak havoc on the world the 18 hours in between. And it occurred to me I was not applying the spiritual principles in all areas of my life, right? You know, my sponsors pounded into me, when I wake up in the morning, the basis of my spiritual program is I have a choice to act on a character defect or act out on a spiritual principle. That is my choice every minute of every day. And I ask God to help me make those choices. That is the basis of my spiritual program, right? Help me make decisions. I don't ask for a lot. I just ask to help me make a decision. Now, there's self-will versus God's will, right? Self-will is me. When I make those decisions all by myself, those are not good decisions, right? If I sponsor any, we have a saying about that. I don't always make good decisions, but when I do, I talk to my sponsor first. And a lot of times I still this day get on the self-will kick, and I'm doing something because I freaking want to. I deserve this, and those generally don't work out too well, either for me or someone else. And the whole thing about praying is just the concept of asking for some information outside of my own stupid head, right? If I'm in a meeting and I'm listening to you, that's God speaking. If I call my sponsor, he's talking to me, that's God speaking, right? When I sit in these workshops and listen to you, that's God speaking. God had never forsaken me. But a friend of mine said, your higher power knows exactly where you are. You don't have to go looking for him. It's been there the whole time, right? The whole time. But I just chose not to see it, or I couldn't see it, blinded with addiction. And so I spent a lot of time on this, but it's really for those people that struggle. Just find something outside of you. Let it help you make decisions. And I don't necessarily know what I need to do all the time, but sometimes I can just eliminate what I don't need to do. Let's see. Friends going to the party tonight, alcohol will be there. Let's scratch that off the list, right? Hang out with my friend using. I won't use. He respects me. But I just won't use. Because I tell you, the disease is alive and well in me. I have no illusions that if you put drugs in front of me for any period of time, I will use. I promise you. I promise you. And my analogy is Reese's peanut butter cups. I cannot eat the first one. I'm okay. The bag can sit there. But if the bag is opened and I eat the first one, I'm going to eat all of them. And if you gave me your last one, I will get in my car and go get some more. And my lovely friends now, when I go to my office, there's Reese's peanut butter cups in my drawer. They'll be in my car. So I don't have any, that's a simple solution, but it's true. I can't be around it. The one success that I've had is going to meetings, and I have a very strong NA fellowship. I hang out, 90% of the people I hang out with are in recovery. I stay in the middle of the bed for those days when I don't feel like doing it, and I still have those. Right. Next topic is really sponsorship. So I had a couple of sponsors early on, and I fired them, which meant I never called them again. I was one of those just sort of snuck away from you, but I got about 2 years clean. I went to meetings every day. I went to a meeting every day for a year and a half. I had friends. I moved in with some recovering addicts, gotten some service, and just doing all the stuff, man. I mean, my day was consumed by recovery. But I started having this weird thing, like my really close friends, I started kind of pulling away. There was distance there. I could feel myself pulling away. Because what I was afraid of is they were going to know what I was like inside, and they were not going to like that, right? And I was still ashamed of myself because I had not shared this stuff with somebody else. And it got worse and worse and worse, and I knew that the solution of enough meetings was to get a sponsor. So I stalked this guy for like 3 months, Mark R. And I listened to him tell his story. He had a career, he had a wife, he had children, he had the things that I wanted. And he talked good game. And so I finally asked him, and I was scared to death. My hands were shaking like this. And I was afraid if he's going to say no, that rejection would have killed me. But he said yes, and he's been my sponsor for 29 years. Still is today. And I talked to him before I came down here today. Just to hear his voice, it made me feel better. But sponsorship, to me, the reason I picked him is because I knew that I could trust him. Because I'd read the steps, right? I knew what was coming. So, he and I rode motorcycles, and we would go up to North Georgia and do step work and all this stuff, and he'd try to kill me. And I met God a couple of times riding up Highway 60, chasing him all over Dahlonega. But we got to the fifth step, and I was just scared to death of sharing this stuff with him, and I wrote it all out, and he finally stopped me. He knew I was nervous. He said, stop. He said, tell me the sickest thing you've ever done right now. Go. And I blurted it out, and then he shared what his was. And I found out he was sicker than me, and I was so happy about that. I've been carrying that crap around all this time, and I was just sicker people walking around the whole time, and I didn't even know it. But what was important about that is, by myself, I still had the demons in my head, and I needed that sponsor to be completely 100% honest with him. And he knows me well. He knows me so well that I'm a good talker, right? I get up and talk in front of people for work and stuff. I could convince you that I have this little project I'm going to do, and you go, that's a great idea, Jimmy, you should do that. I could tell my sponsor the same story, and he's going to go, whoa, time out here. I believe we have been down this road before, and he'll remind me the outcome of it, and I'll go, yeah, that brilliant idea is not really a brilliant idea, is it? Right? So I still need that good orderly direction, and I need to get comfortable and get all of that out. The great part about that is I now have a bunch of men in my life and a sponsorship family, guys. I have 50 people that I can grab at any point in time and tell them anything that's going on in my head. And that is extremely comforting, right? I do not have that loneliness that I had when I was sitting there, without a friend in the world and family not even talking about it, right? All that stuff is gone, and it started with that sponsorship. So that's really why you need the sponsor, to guide me through the steps, but also the person that really knows me to help me make decisions. I need God and I need my sponsor to make sure I make good decisions, because I still don't. I still struggle with that. I still think, I've been clean 31 years. I got this. But I don't. I still make stuff. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was not feeling too well, and I wasn't admitting it to myself. My wife asked me, "You okay?" I mean, we've been on a cruise and stuff. No, I'm fine. Standing out of cancer. And then what really drove it home is me and a sponsor went out to dinner and went out to eat. We went to meet and went out to eat, and then we got done. I was driving home. He called me. He goes, "Man, I just want to call you. You okay? You didn't look okay." And I said, "No, you're absolutely right. I'm not okay. I need to talk." And I went to another meeting. They asked me to lead discussion. It's like when you're hurt and I'm going to sit in the back and they ask you to lead discussion. And it forced me to say what I needed to say, right? And then I felt better. It wasn't a big deal, but I was just heading down that direction. I don't think I can be stagnant in recovery. I'm either heading towards recovery or I'm heading towards using, right? Relapse and recovery says that using is the last act of a relapse. A relapse started long before that. When I'm not doing anything, that means I'm going backwards. Okay? Absolutely backwards. Today I have sponsees, probably 12 of them. We got a big sponsorship family. We do sponsorship retreats and all this stuff. And any of them they're great guys, and I love hanging out with them. And I tell, now I've got people that are sponsoring people, and now I'm training the sponsor to be a sponsor, which is kind of fun too. And I love this part is I get this phone call, not picking on anybody. Man, I got this guy, it's 30 days. I've had him for 30 days. I don't know if this is working out. He won't do anything I tell him to do. Coming from somebody that's been sitting on a 7-step for about 12 months, won't listen to me. It's like all of a sudden they gotta follow the rules, right? I didn't follow the rules, but you're going to do everything I tell you to do. And I just kind of laugh and go, the sponsees that I have taught me as much or more about myself than when I do the steps. Right? And if you're not doing a service that way, you're just missing out, right? I don't do service to give back to NA necessarily. I'm selfish reasons. I do service because I need to, right? Because me helping you helps me more than me helping you. And my sponsees are more important to me than I am to them. And once they start sponsoring people, they begin to understand that. I mean, you'll have stuff that happens, like, a few weeks ago, somebody called me and wanted to go to a meeting. I was going to watch something on TV, and I'm like, fuck, I don't want to go. Just a second, I said, all right, pick you up. And I'll hang up the phone, and we'll get in the car, start talking, go to a meeting, and I heard something really cool that I needed to hear at the meeting. But I wouldn't have ever heard that if I hadn't been a service and go take somebody to a meeting or ride with them, meet them there, right? I got to be involved. This program's like a raffle. You must be present to win. Okay. So I want to get into some things that I had to walk through and get through. Like I told you, some of my biggest character defects are resentment, fear, self-pity, shame, just eating up with it. And I got a couple examples of how I sort of got that. And I want to talk about my father for a minute. And so my father flew for Eastern Airlines. Now, if you're a 5-year-old kid and you walk up and see that your father flies one of those planes sitting out here, it is the coolest job on the planet. I mean, that beat firemen, policemen. My father was a god to me. He flew airplanes, and that's what I'm going to do when I grow up. I mean, I worship the ground that he worked on. And my father was a stoic person. He was not a huggy, I'm going to love you kind of thing. That wasn't coming out of my dad's mouth, okay? That's just the way he was raised. And my whole family's a little bit like that too. And so when I was about 12 or 13 years old, he had a heart problem. WPW syndrome, it makes your heart beat too fast. And the first time it showed up, basically used to build up body fluids. He gained 30 pounds in 8 hours, where he couldn't even tie his robe together. And basically what they have to do is zap you, like bring you back, zap you to slow the heart down. You have an extra impulse. And it just popped up in his early 50s, I think. And but in order to do this, he had to take medication. And the medication caused him to take his pilot's license away from him. Okay? So now I'm a little kid. I'm not really aware of any of this. I'm just becoming a teenager, so I'm freaking crazy to begin with. I'm just starting to use. So, my dad got really angry. Okay? And to the point where he backhanded me across the room a couple of times just by walking by him. Scream at me. I was scared to death of him. I wouldn't be in the same room with him. The dog would run from him. And I thought it was me. I didn't know any better. I thought he hated me. I wouldn't go see him at the hospital. I said, he didn't want to see me. So here my hero growing up had become this monster to me. And it was difficult. Our relationship just split after that for a number of years. Of course, I'm diving down into addiction and all this stuff. And what I'm getting to is learning about resentment and forgiveness. I resented the way he treated me in those years. I resented the fact that I was an accident. I was not a wanted child. And that's a true fact. But my mom, I've heard the story before. And I was going through a lot of, like 10 years, people tend to struggle 7 to 10 years, and I was struggling. I went to, I had a psychologist, I was doing another fifth step, I was doing anything, and I had a lot of pain in me about some of this stuff coming up. But what came out of it was, I believe that whenever you have character defects, the only way to get rid of them is to replace them with a spiritual principle. Right? So instead of practicing that resentment, patience, tolerance, and understanding. So I realized in my later recovery that my father had the thing that he cared about the most taken away from him, right? And that would hurt anyone. And I just happened to be there, right, when this anger and frustration came out as anger, right? And that's probably where I learned to cover my stuff with anger as well. And I ended up to the point where I forgave my father for anything that he did, and this is the nice part. I did that without him saying a damn thing. Right? Because this wasn't about him, this was about me understanding where my father came from. He became a pilot when my mother's parents wanted him to be a farmer in Texas. He took the pilot's job and left, and they never forgave him. They never flew on an airplane just to spite him. Right? He had his pilot's license taken away from him, and he couldn't do the thing that he loved the most. And he was in pain. And I understand that. The actions weren't right, but I understand why it happened. And forgiveness was there, right? The day my father passed away, he was my best friend. And recovery gave me that, and I'm very grateful for it. So, if you're struggling with abuse and things like that, I don't know a way other than finding some forgiveness. And it took me a long time to work with that. That's the only way I know to let go of it, is to find the forgiveness somewhere, right? And that's what worked for me. That's all I can tell you. The next one will have to be about the kids. So can't leave out the kids. So. My wife and I, by the way, we've been married 25 years. She got clean when she was 16 years old. She has 33 years clean. So between the two of us, it's 64 or 2 years, depending on the day it is. We subtract each other out some days, but not all the time. And so we had these great kids, and our kids were great, and we struggled with our marriage a few times growing up. But as parents, we were on the same page with the kids, and they were good kids. My son was really smart, made straight A's to the 5th grade. My daughter had the nicest temperament. She was always, if there was a dispute, she'd bring people together, right, and fix it. Jacob came in crying one day, and she stomped outside and just chewed out all the kids and said, "You hurt my brother's feelings. You need to apologize." He's 4 years old. I wasn't worried about him. And our parenting was on the same line. The boundaries and all that stuff was on line. And then when they got to be 13 or 14, God took those 2 children and replaced them with these 2 other children. And I'm sharing this with you because at some point you will have teenagers, and you need to be prepared for it. I was not prepared for it. Okay? So my brilliant son, he's 24 today, by the way. He's still alive. I didn't kill him. I became, he was a teenager. I mean, he's not a bad kid. He was not any worse than any other teenager. It's just that point where you want to be an adult, but you don't have the skills to be so. Your parents try to teach you like you're 8, and there's this battle. There's always conflict in the household. And it was a challenge. I mean, wife and I sat, my daughter was about 14, we're sitting at the table, and she looked at me and she said, "Our daughter's a bitch." I said, "I know." I didn't want to say anything, but I feel the same way. But this story is not about the children. This story is about me, okay? My son started using a little, my daughter used a little bit, and I'm freaking scared to death. I mean, my children have been in meetings since they were 3 weeks old. They should know better, right? That's what I'm thinking. And he doesn't want to do his homework, he's not showing up for class, all the classic stuff, and I'm going to freaking fix him. If they kill him. So I grabbed all my character defects. I got good at using some that I'd never even had before. And 4 years of my house was miserable. If I was not lecturing, arguing with Kim about the kids, I was arguing with the kids to the point to where I didn't want to come home. I travel for a living. I planned days out so I could stay away from home longer because I didn't want to go home. Home was horrible. If they would just listen to me, everything would be okay. It got so bad that we hit bottom with stuff, right? First steps, not just for drugs. I hit bottom with it, and I went to my sponsor, Mike. I said, "I need to do the steps again, man. I'm dying here. I'm 25 years clean, and I'm a raving lunatic. Waving a flag of great intention the entire time, right? With my children, particularly my son, right? And he's using. He went to college, and kind of the frost on the cake. He goes to college for a year like me, and he's using, not showing up for class. I tried incentives. I tried everything. And the last conversation I had, he was dropping out of school, and he was going to stay down there for a while, and I freaking reamed him out of the phone. I mean, I was ugly. Ugly. And he disappeared for 2 months. And I was scared to death. That was the last thing I was going to ever say to him. About 2 months later, he called. He said, "Dad, can I come home? I'm tired of living like this." Not the best phone call I ever had. And through all the step work, what I'm trying to tell you is I speak to my children a lot differently. I don't lecture them, because every time he was in front of me, I was telling him what's wrong with him, what he should do. I wouldn't want to have been in front of me either. I was out in the driveway one day, and my wife said, "There needs to be an adult in this conversation, and you're not it." That was a hard pill to swallow. But she was absolutely right. And so I discovered after a lot of step work that what I chose to not say to my son was more important than what I chose to say to my son. Right? I mean, he's that old. He's got to make decisions for himself. And I quit being controlling as best I could. I let him make decisions. And he started making some better decisions. And I got the thought, God took care of me. Why can I not have the faith to allow God to take care of my son? Right. Because my way of doing it was just pushing him further and further away from me. Right? He wouldn't speak to me. Today, my children and I are best friends. I love them to death. He sent me some texts today. I told him I was going to send him a happy birthday from 300 people. And my daughter is a great kid, and I'll tell you a story about her. She was wanting to get tattoos, and I'm like, "Just wait a little while. She's dead set. So she just killed me. And there was nothing I could do about it. You love your daughter. She comes in. I taught her photography. She's a wedding photographer, but I taught her how to do photography. She had this guy draw the camera that I taught her on, and she had this tattoo. And she said, "Dad, I put this tattoo on because it reminds me of you teaching me photography." It's like, all right, I lost. So I let them be, let them make their own choices, and allow them to make decisions for themselves, even when I frickin' can't stand it. And that was a challenging part to me. And today, like I said, we have a very good relationship. They actually ask for my advice occasionally, instead of me shoving it down their throat, whether they wanted it or not. but I learned a lot about me. So that whole story wasn't about them; it was just about me. Right? And the funny part was thinking about my dad is I somehow turned into the monster that I hated in my own house. You end up being like your parents even when you don't really think about it. And so once again, I think a lot about my dad and how we got through all that, and Jacob and I have gotten through all that as well. The shame, I'll tell you about shame and self-esteem was mine. I was introverted, extremely introverted when I came in here. I'm talking, scared to death. I heard the word terror, and I could relate to that better than fear. To give you an idea, at the meeting, the New Connections meeting was a podium participation meeting. So the first time I went there, they handed me this reading. Right? I'm used to reading it in the chair. Hey, I went to high school and a few years of college. I could read. And they said, no, you got to go up the podium. And I'm like, do what? So the first time I got up there, it was something long too, like how it works or something. I'm holding the paper and it's shaking and I'm reading it and I can't even see it. So I let go of it and the whole thing was shaking like this. But I was afraid to let go because my knees would collapse. I would sit in the back at the dances. If you touched me on the shoulder, I'd jump straight up in the air. So I had all this fear, and it kept me from taking any risk whatsoever or doing anything. So I wanted to do something to get out of it. And we had this big talent show at the Northside Clubhouse. And so I volunteered to do a stand-up comedy act, the most introverted human being on the planet. And so I wrote out this thing. I'm doing 20 minutes worth. And then just like sitting here, I'm thinking, oh my God, what have I done? I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. So I borrowed my sponsor's son's little bitty bicycle, and I played Born to Be Wild and rode on stage with Born to Be Wild playing. I grabbed the microphone, man, and I did it. I spent 15, 20 minutes telling jokes, making people laugh at some of it. But it wasn't about the jokes, right? It was about me stepping out of my comfort zone and doing something a little bit different. And they all, just like they loved me, they encouraged me, and they made it a really good experience. And it changed me. It changed me. It took away some of that fear so I could take some risks and try some things that I'd never done before. Right? Go back to school, change a job. I was going to quit a job and I was too scared. I was afraid they would beat me if I quit this job. That's the kind of fear that I walked at. I was trying to go see my boss and I veered off to go to the bathroom and I stopped back by for some water and then I thought I needed some coffee. And then finally I walked in there and I, once again, handshake, and I need to quit. She's like, well, we want to keep you. Can we give you more money? She started trying to keep me, and I thought she was going to yell and scream at me. That's just all the guilt and shame that I had. The only way to get over that is self-esteem, is to do things that are esteemable. Right? Do things that I'm proud of. Frickin' clean my room. Make my bed. I'm going to write a book, and it's going to start, how to get clean is to make your bed. Hell, if you can't get that right, and some of the other things I had too is talk about gratitude, getting over kind of self-pity and stuff. And when I first got clean and treatment and all, I had good experiences here, but I still had the monkey on my back, right? I was still thinking about using it constantly. And I pray, and like I said, I tried to. They told me to, and I was scared to death. I'd pray. I'd go, please, God, don't let anybody see me like this. I'd be on my knees and stuff. I was taking suggestions. I was desperate. I'd try anything just to stop this pain from happening to me. But a really cool thing happened. And the first day that I really had some gratitude in my life, I was a landscaper. And I had a 2 or 3 months clean, and we just finished this yard, planted all the shrubs, raked it all out, planted seed, put the straw down, got the sprinklers going. And the sun's starting to set, and I'm dirty and tired, it's hot, and then I'm drinking a Gatorade, and shit, I hadn't thought about using it all day. It was the first one. It was the first one. I remember the first one. So if you got your monkey on your back, you just keep coming back, it will go away, I promise you. Promise you. Hang in there, guys. Hang in there. Also, I like to tell this story about, what I love about gratitude. There was an old timer. Doesn't matter. There was an old timer named Floyd. And he used to go to this meeting, and you ever have somebody that comes in a meeting that kind of glows? You know, I mean, when they walk in the door, there's something different about them, right? I don't know. You just could see it in this guy. I mean, he called himself a grateful hillbilly drunk or whatever. But he was happy to be alive. He had been dead on the side of the road. Somebody found him, took him to the hospital. He was just grateful to be walking and talking. You know? And but he said this saying. He said, you know, God hasn't opened up the gates of heaven and let me in, but He did open up the gates of hell and let me out. And what I really like about that is a grateful addict will never use. And gratitude is sometimes challenging to find, right? And way I've found, and I'm just sharing my experience on this, gratitude lists are great, and that's good, and I've used that as well. But what I like to look at is think about where I used to be and where I am now, right? I like to ride bicycles, and I do crazy stuff like ride 100 miles and stuff. So the first time I went up the mountains or right up this mountain, it was like, I'm going to get to the top of this mountain. You're all excited about it. About halfway up, you're going, why did I do this? I'm breathing, talking to Elvis, and like about to pass out. I'm thinking, I don't think I can do this, right? I just, you get through something in your life and you think, I can't do this. I don't think I'm going to make it. And about halfway up this mountain, up in the North Georgia mountains, you go around this curve and there's a lookout, right? And then I could kind of see back where the car was, and I realized how far up the mountain I had already gone. And then when I looked back up to the top of the mountain, it didn't seem to be that far up there. So I may not be where I want to be, but I damn sure am not where I used to be. And I'll get on that pity pot. I was on it the other day with my job, man. I got so wound up about stuff. They changed some things, and I was on an airplane, and I had an hour, 2 hours by myself in my head, and that is not a good thing. These assholes, that's what they've done to me. This comp system is terrible. I'm just going to I'm going to quit my job. I hate this thing. It's all over. And by the time I got off the plane, I was wound up, man, and I'm like just yelling and stuff. And I was so upset about something that was like going to affect my life about that much. But I allowed it to turn into this whirling dervish inside of my head. And I'm yelling. I mean, my wife will come in and go, you okay? I'm in there screaming in my office in the back of the thing going, yelling profanity, just letting something get to me. And I have to just stop a little bit. And, the sponsee calls me for a minute. And that's where recovery kicks in. And we talk about what's going on with them for a few minutes. The next thing I knew, I look at this problem in front of me, and it's really not that big a deal. But I just have this thing about taking stuff, and I got 10 things on the list. I accomplished 9 of them. I will obsess over the one thing that I didn't do, right? But if I can find that gratitude in my life, right, of where I am, where I used to be, I don't think I can use it if I have that gratitude in my life. But I just got to keep that in mind, as I walk through this life. I've really been raised here. I mean, when I came here, I was very immature, spiritually bankrupt, physically in bad shape. And Narcotics Anonymous has truly raised me. So if y'all don't like what you heard here today, it's all of your fault, because y'all have truly raised me. You really have. I got my wife and I can say the last day, the relationship, we have struggled from time to time in our marriage, like people do, and we always say that the reason neither one of us want to get divorced at the same time, which is part of that's probably a little bit of luck on our part. But I will say this: without Narcotics Anonymous, we would not be married. I can promise you that much. And we have a good relationship. I mean, the last fight we had was 5 or 6 years ago, back in the teenage years, and it started over a dirty coffee mug, and escalated to World War III in our household. But I want to tell you that another gift that recovery has given me is our relationship, and I'm not trying to exaggerate because I'm standing up here, is I love her more now than ever, and our relationship is better than it ever has been, ever. And I couldn't see being with anyone else and walking through this, life that we have and this program and all the miracles that we have here. And I love you very much. Thank you for being with me. Thank you for helping me raise my children, stopping me from killing our son a couple of times. Anyway, guys, that's about all I got. I appreciate y'all listening to me, and thank you to the committee. Y'all have done a good job. Just remember to give them a hug. About now, they're really going to need it. A lot of work, a lot of money, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears goes into these conventions, and I really appreciate those that put it on, and I know how important it is and how difficult it can be at times. So thanks for listening to me, and I appreciate it.
I want to thank Jimmy again for speaking. That was awesome. Let's go ahead and circle up.